One of the questions I often get is what is wrong with contemporary worship music or contemporary worship styles? And I want to make a very important distinction in this sort of question and how I answer it. Excuse me. So, the first part I want to, these two different parts. The first part is the question of contemporary elements. So things like instruments that you wouldn't see in a traditionalist church, like, you see guitars or drums or the things like that. Those are not in and of themselves a problem. And contemporary songs, for instance, are not necessarily a problem. Now, I have problems with particular groups, but we won't get into that today. And that's because of the theological bent, and if there's even a bent, well, there is, but it's very shallow at best, sort of stuff. So, but that's a different thing that I can talk about at another time. That's particular songs. There are good contemporary Christian worship songs. Andrew Peterson, I'm a huge fan of. He's got really good songs. Is He Worthy, for instance, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So the question then is, those things are not bad. There's not a problem with having songs that were written a few years ago with guitars and drums, even within the worship context. That's never been a concern for me. However, and that's not really a concern for a lot of theologians and Christians who are in the traditional section, as far as like other denominations, especially, and stuff. However, the problem, though, becomes when the aim of worship is entertainment, or even, and this might sound odd at first, but I will sort of elaborate on it, even the idea of sort of getting outsiders to come in, to draw non-Christians into worship. So, that might sound a little, like I said, a little troublesome. I'll get into that part in a second. So the first part of this is entertainment. When we make worship into primarily aimed at entertaining people in order for them to come in, that is when we have lost the focus of worship. The focus of worship should always, always, always be upon God. And it is axiomatic. I don't mean to be flippant about this. I mean this in all sincerity, and I don't like saying this. But if you've changed worship, which is worship of God, into primarily focusing on entertainment, on the satisfaction of the people, then what you're doing is you're switching the focus of worship from God to man. And that is idolatry. That it's hard to say that it's not when you're switching the focus from God to man. So that is the problem I have with entertainment parts. And this is not just a, sort of, modern contemporary services or anything like that. This is not just exclusively a problem there. This is a problem, I would say, with, even with the high church tradition, you can have this problem. You can have this idea of, well, we're caring more about the vestments and the, because we want to impress people and all that sort of stuff. No. You have to, you find this problem all throughout. So if the focus is on trying to satisfy people, then we have a problem. The focus should be upon the three persons of the Trinity, So then back to what I said, the second part of that, the idea that our job in worship on Sunday is not to get non-Christians to come into the service. Now, I don't mean by that we should not let non-Christians come into the service. Never would I say that. It is important to understand, though, that we look at worship in Scripture. You look in the Old Testament, it is about the people of God gathering to worship God. You look in the New Testament, it is about the people of God gathering to worship God. You don't see these sorts of indications of any sort that the focus of Sunday worship, or Saturday in the Old Testament, that's Sabbath, but the focusing of worship being how can we get more people to come in and become, part of the people of God? That's never the question. The question is, we're worshiping God. We're gathering together as a community of the believers. And it is important to note that in the early church, actually, for the second half of the liturgy, we have the liturgy of the Word, and then we have the liturgy of the sacrament, where we receive the communion. So in the liturgy of the Word, not acolytes, excuse me, those who were going through catechesis, they were allowed to be there for the liturgy of the Word, but they could not be there for the liturgy of the sacrament. Meaning that even these people who were wanting to become Christians, they were then separated for the central act of worship. And, I'm not saying that that's the standard we should have today. We're in a different context today. But it's to note that throughout church history, we have understood that worship is about worshiping God, not bringing people to a church so that we can get them saved or get them to become Christians. That's what we're supposed to do all the rest of the hours of the week. But on Sunday morning, what we do, our job is to worship God. So now, can you, again, you can have obviously people come, and you can have people, become Christians within the church, and that's what we actually do. I mean, that's when they get baptized in the church. And there are people who are searching and asking questions, and I've actually invited non-Christians to come to our church services. But it's the question of the focus. And our focus should always first be worshiping God. And then from that flows everything else of, okay, if there are non-Christians here, how do we deal with that? And letting them feel comforted and loved and all that sort of stuff. But when we focus on, well, how do we get more people into the seats? And this is a prevalent problem, I would say, in various parts of American Christianity, within evangelical circles especially. This is where, I know good megachurches, I know good pastors of megachurches, but there are also a lot of bad ones. And it is run like a business where entertainment is the primary focus. And I won't name any, and I'm sure that if you could think of some that are not like that, I'm sure you could. You might show them to me and I'd be like, after looking at them, I'd probably agree with you. And I don't know a percentage. It's somewhere in between 0 and 100%, somewhere. But I have seen it happen. And I've seen it happen more often than not in my own personal sort of experience of, evangelicalism. So I want to point out that we have to make sure our focus of worship is upon God, not upon getting people in, increasing numbers, or anything like that. Excuse me. So if we keep that in mind as our central focus, then I think we do a lot better. And you can have a contemporary sort of style worship. If that is the tradition of your denomination, I'm not telling you to do it like an Anglican service using the Book of Common Prayer 1928 with incense, ad orientem, all that sort of stuff. You follow the tradition that your denomination is a part of, but understand that when you are forming the service, preparing for that service for Sunday, you have to ask yourself, what is your motivation in worship, and what is the motivation you are trying to convey in worship? If you're trying to motivate people to, if you're trying to motivate people through entertainment, I think that is a problem. And I think we do well when we avoid that and instead focus on God. So that's it, and thank you very much.